Today I want to talk about something almost nobody seems to be paying attention to right now. And honestly, that's what makes it so fascinating. Because once you step back and look at the bigger picture, you realize the real story of this conflict is not the explosions in Tehran, not the missiles flying over the Gulf, and not even the tension around the Strait of Hormuz. The real story is China. More specifically, it's about what China is choosing not to do. China isn't launching missiles. It isn't deploying troops. It isn't making dramatic threats. Instead, it's staying calm, staying quiet, and simply watching. And while the world is distracted by war, China is quietly positioning itself to win in a way that could shape global politics for the next 50 years. Before we go further, let me address something directly. A lot of people accuse me of pushing Chinese propaganda. Some say I always praise China or sound like a spokesperson for Beijing. But listen carefully, I'm not here to defend countries. I'm here to analyze patterns, incentives, and evidence. That's my job. So here's my challenge to critics. If my facts are wrong, point them out. Show me the numbers. Show me the evidence. I'll gladly correct anything inaccurate. But if the data holds up, then don't attack where the argument comes from. Engage with the argument itself. Criticizing the speaker instead of the evidence isn't analysis. It's avoidance. Now let's break this down step by step. To understand China's strategy, you first need to understand the game being played. And at the center of that game is one thing: oil. Who controls it? Who moves it? And who benefits from that control? Some people say the world's most important resource today is semiconductors. Others say freshwater or rare earth minerals. But when you really strip everything down, oil still sits at the center of the global system. Oil powers factories, ships, trucks, airplanes, armies, everything. Without oil, modern economies freeze. Trade stops, militaries stop, entire societies stop functioning. And here's the critical point. The country that controls the flow of oil doesn't just control energy. It influences the entire global economy. This is exactly what the United States understood after World War II, which is why it built the Petrodollar system. The arrangement was simple. Saudi Arabia would sell oil exclusively in US dollars, and in return, America would guarantee the security of the Saudi monarchy. That deal changed the world. Because once oil could only be bought in dollars, every country on earth suddenly needed dollars. And when the entire world needs your currency, you gain extraordinary power. America could print money, run massive deficits, borrow endlessly, and still maintain global demand for its currency. That became the real foundation of American dominance. Not just aircraft carriers, not just nuclear weapons, not even technology. The true engine of American power was the dollar's connection to oil. Which brings us to the next question. Who poses the biggest long-term threat to that system? China. Now think like a strategist for a moment. China is the largest oil importer in the world, bringing in roughly 11 million barrels per day. Its entire industrial system depends on imported energy. But over the last decade, China made a very smart move. Instead of relying entirely on dollar-based oil markets, it quietly began purchasing discounted oil from sanctioned countries like Iran and Venezuela, and often paying in Chinese yuan instead of dollars. Iran, blocked by sanctions, needed buyers. China needed cheap energy. So Iran sold oil quietly to China, often through indirect shipping routes and disguised paperwork. Tankers would change identification near places like Malaysia or Indonesia before heading to Chinese ports. The same happened with Venezuela. What China created was an alternative energy network, discounted oil outside the dollar system, increasingly traded in yuan. And every barrel traded in yuan instead of dollars weakens the dominance of the petrodollar. Washington understood that, which is why this conflict is about far more than nuclear weapons or regional security. Beneath the public narrative lies a deeper struggle over the future of the global financial system. Look at the timing. First, pressure intensified on Venezuela, limiting China's access there. Then came escalating confrontation with Iran, another major Chinese energy supplier. Within a short period, China suddenly faced disruptions to a significant portion of its imported oil supply. From Washington's perspective, the logic was obvious. Pressure China indirectly by targeting the energy sources sustaining its economic growth. But here's where things become interesting. China didn't panic. It didn't collapse economically. It didn't scramble publicly for solutions. Because China had prepared for this possibility years in advance. It had already built enormous strategic oil reserves. It had deepened energy ties with Russia, another sanctioned exporter willing to trade outside the dollar system. And it had already begun accelerating renewable energy, electric vehicle production, and nuclear power development. In other words, China had contingency plans. Yes, there were higher transportation costs and economic pressures, but the system held. And while America believed it was weakening China, something else was happening at the same time. The war was damaging America's own credibility in the Middle East. That matters more than most people realize. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, form the backbone of the petrodollar order. Their oil exports, dollar reserves, and investments are deeply tied to the American financial system. But those states also rely on one thing in return: security. The unwritten deal has always been simple. We price oil in dollars and America protects us. Now imagine what happens when missile strikes and drone attacks continue despite heavy American military involvement. The Gulf states begin asking dangerous questions. Can America still guarantee security? Can America still dominate the region the way it once did? Can America still be trusted as the unquestioned protector of the Gulf order? And once those doubts begin, the foundation of the petrodollar system starts to crack. Because geopolitics ultimately runs on credibility. Not just military strength, credibility. The belief that you can protect allies, enforce rules, and maintain order. And credibility, once weakened, is extremely difficult to restore. This is where China's strategy becomes incredibly sophisticated. Instead of entering the conflict militarily, China positioned itself as the calm, responsible power calling for negotiation, ceasefires, and stability. While others exchanged threats, China focused on diplomacy. That matters enormously for perception. The Gulf states are watching carefully. They see America tied to conflict and instability. They see China offering trade, infrastructure, investment, and energy partnerships without demands for regime change or military occupation. China is presenting itself not as a conqueror, but as a stable economic partner. And over time, that image can become more powerful than military force itself. Now let's think longer term. In the short term, yes, China experienced pressure on its energy supply. But in the medium and long term, America is spending vast military resources, exposing weaknesses and stretching its strategic focus. Every missile launched in the Middle East is a resource unavailable elsewhere. Every prolonged deployment drains stockpiles, budgets, and political patience. China, meanwhile, is learning. It is studying American tactics, observing logistical limitations, and gathering valuable intelligence about how the United States responds under pressure. And while America spends heavily on war, China continues investing in infrastructure, manufacturing, technology, ports, pipelines, and global trade networks. That difference is crucial. Because the nature of power in the 21st century is changing. In the 20th century, power meant military dominance. The strongest nation was the one with the biggest army and the most weapons. But today, real power is increasingly structural. The most powerful country is the one embedded at the center of global networks, trade networks, energy networks, technology networks, financial networks. Military strength still matters, but structural influence lasts longer. America built the defining military empire of the 20th century. China is trying to build the defining economic network of the 21st. Its Belt and Road Initiative stretches across continents. Its manufacturing sector dominates global production chains. Its rare earth supply influences critical technologies worldwide. And its efforts to expand yuan-based trade challenge dollar dominance step by step. Not dramatically, not overnight, gradually, patiently, strategically. That's why this moment matters so much. Because while headlines focus on bombs and battlefields, the deeper transformation may be happening quietly underneath. America is fighting to preserve an existing order. China is building an alternative one. And history often turns not on the loudest battles, but on the slow shifts underneath them. the changes in trade, finance, energy, and trust that reshaped the global system over decades. So, when future historians look back at this period, they may not see it simply as another Middle Eastern conflict. They may see it as a turning point, the moment when the foundations of American global dominance began to weaken, and the moment China quietly accelerated its rise, not through direct war, but through patience, preparation, and strategic positioning. That is the deeper story unfolding beneath the surface.